Welcome to Teaching Truth. Monopoly is a board game which I'm sure many of us have played at one point or another. Going around the Monopoly board from Old Kent Road to Mayfair, landing on stations and utilities, buying houses and hotels, spending and accumulating money. However, you may be unfortunate enough if you land on Community Chest to receive one of these cards. Go to jail. Go directly to jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect £200. However, if you land on chance, you may receive one of these cards. A get out of jail free card. The get out of jail free card in Monopoly is an element of the board game which not only gets you out of jail if you are playing it, but which has become a popular metaphor for something that will get you out of an undesirable situation. Get out of jail free. Get out of jail free is the theme for our reflections this week as we look at someone who, in a sense, got out of jail free. I'm referring to Peter, whom we read of in Acts chapter 12. Peter, a disciple, a follower of Jesus, was in jail. For him, an undesirable situation. And yet he got out of jail free because of the intervention of God into that situation. No one had to pay a price in a monetary sense to get him out of jail. And the account of Peter's miraculous escape from prison is an exciting one which is laced with lessons for us today. And in our first reflection this week, as we think of Peter's miraculous escape from prison under our theme, Get Out of Jail Free, we want to paint the picture, as it were, and look at the persecution by Herod. The persecution by Herod which was taking place. Herod, put it simply, was harassing the church. Now, this Herod was Herod Agrippa the First, the grandson of Herod the Great. Herod the Great, who ruled in the days when Jesus was born. And Herod Agrippa the First was also the nephew of Herod Antipas, who had a role in the trial of Jesus. And Herod was harassing the church, and he would be doing that because it was politically convenient and politically popular for him. It pleased many of his citizens who didn't like Christians. And many political figures, even today, and you don't need to look too far in our modern political culture, are ready to persecute Christians for political popularity. Herod was harassing the church to the degree that the Apostle James was put to death by the sword. Now, this was a new development in the history of the church. Stephen had been stoned, and now we find James also being put to death for his good confession. And this is against the backdrop of things going really well, by and large, for the church. The church had been on a streak of success. Conversions were taking place. It was growing. And as we thought last week, the church at Antioch was a model church that was alive and things were happening. People were coming to know Jesus. And yet, right off the back of that, there is an ugly opposition to all that is taking place. And James was martyred. He was put to death by the sword for his good confession. And that reminds us that Jesus promises no protection, no special protection, even for his closest followers. James, the brother of John. Rather, Jesus in Matthew 10 warned his followers, and indeed warns us, to be ready for persecution. Persecution was alive and kicking in the early church. And it's likely that if he was put to death by the sword, James would have been beheaded. A grueling and horrific death. And at this same time, Peter is put in prison. Peter is put in prison. And Herod sought to, as it were, improve his ratings and increase his popularity when he seized Peter and decided to throw him in prison. And he was intending to bring him before the people after Passover. Now, why was that? Well, Herod decided to deal with Peter at a politically opportune time. Because had he dealt with Peter during Passover when pilgrims were filling Jerusalem, he could potentially have been dealing with a very unpredictable mob. And so he delayed executing and, in a sense, dealing with Peter, because Herod wanted to show how he scrupulously, or so it would seem, observed the Passover. He wanted to wait until the pilgrim crowds had gone home to avert a riot, and he wanted to wait until he had the full attention of the Jewish population. And he delivered him, that is Peter, to 4 squads of soldiers. Knowing that Peter, with other apostles, had mysteriously escaped from prison before, you just need to read Acts chapter 5, verses 17 to 21, Herod assigned a high security detail, as it were, to guard Peter. John Stott says this: normally it was considered enough for a prisoner to be handcuffed to one soldier, but as a special precaution, Peter had a soldier each side of him, and both of his wrists were manacled. So there were always 4 soldiers guarding Peter. Extraordinary precautions were taken by chaining him to 2 soldiers instead of 1, as usual. So that's the background to the account of Peter in prison. Herod was persecuting the church. James has been beheaded. And Peter, because of his good confession also, has been captured and has been thrown into prison. But Peter wasn't to remain in prison, for Peter was to get out of jail free. Join me tomorrow in Teaching Truth to discover how that happened.